We're now on episode 3 of our video series, Understanding Today's World Order. In this episode, I'll talk about what happened in the global economy between 2000 and 2008, from the dot-com bubble to the global economic crisis in 2008. The 1990s were a golden age, when free market economic policies were all the rage. Post-Cold War military spending went down. The information revolution increased productivity and communication, and the winds of globalization started blowing. While the Western world finished the first part of globalization and enjoyed its technology and money, Japan continued to suffer from the huge economic crisis it had in 1991. Japan's lost years weren't just a thing of the 1990s. The impact of the 1991 crisis, along with the 2008 global economic crisis, is still felt today. Russia, the country that came from the Soviet Union, was dealing with a lot of problems in the 2000s. They were trying to figure out a new political structure while the Soviet Union was falling apart. After a long period of depression and the embarrassing results of the First Chechen War, Yeltsin's resignation and the rise of a young and dynamic leader meant that Russia's 2000s would be quite different. Putin, a former KGB agent, was the opposite of Yeltsin. He ruthlessly applied a method that never changed, from the Russian imperial legacy to Stalin, avoiding human costs when necessary. The basic principles of the world don't change easily. After all, the east of the Buk River is a whole other Europe. On December 31, 1999, the world was pretty stoked and optimistic about entering a new millennium, but no one really knew how wild the 2000s would be. The neoliberal system started showing signs of strain at the beginning of the 2000s. The first sign of this was the bursting of the dot-com bubble. Back in the US, the dot-com bubble was about to burst as the year 2000 rolled around. This happened because the market valuations of tech and IT companies were inflated. At the end of the day, these high valuations were based on figures that just didn't make sense. They were produced by overly optimistic models based on high growth potential. Some rules in economics never change. Dreams inflate the bubble, and investors who decide to realize their profits will one day burst the bubble inflated by those dreams. The technology bubble is proof of the principle that so many high-value companies cannot coexist in the same sector. After the bankruptcies and mergers in the sector, most of which ended in failure, a structure emerged that grew healthily and created synergy. The bursting of the dot-com bubble revealed another important truth. WorldCom's predicament revealed that the company used fraudulent accounting methods and that the system had significant gaps in terms of corporate governance and oversight. But the real bombshells would explode in 2002-2003, outside the IT sector. The Achilles heel of the economic order, which was run on the concept of laissez-faire, or let them do it, began to reveal itself. The September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks, which occurred against this economic backdrop, came as a real shock to the world. The destruction of the 2 towers of the World Trade Center in New York and the damage inflicted on the Pentagon resulted in the loss of approximately 3,000 lives. The real shock, however, was that the world's sole superpower had suddenly been subjected to such an attack on its own soil. This terrorist attack would have an impact nearly as profound in the United States as the Pearl Harbor attack, 1941. The US quickly mobilized its military machinery, first invading Afghanistan, October 2001, and then Iraq, March 2003. The post-war resistance in Iraq 2003 to 2006 would keep the US's attention focused on this region for a long time. The beginning of the US's project to redesign the Middle East, Great Middle East Project, coincides with this period. Many economists, including Greenspan, supported the Bush administration's intervention in Iraq and the Middle East region under the guise of securing oil and energy logistics. After all, following the mild recession of 2001, the US couldn't afford the risk of an oil shock in the aftermath of the September 11th attacks. The cost of this risk had been experienced during the oil shock period between 1973 and 1980. For this reason, although the military operation in Iraq was based on fabricated reasons, there was a very strong economic reason behind it. The US will continue to implement this strategic plan without much change, even after the Democrats come to power much later, only putting its methods in Obama's velvet glove. Indeed, while war expenditures, war on terror, totaled $1.1 trillion during the Bush era, these expenditures will not end as expected during the Obama era, but will fall to $820 billion. Obama will simply not use the term war on terror. In the midst of all this turmoil, another critical development that has been overshadowed is China's accession to the World Trade Organization on December 11, 2001. China's GDP, which was $1.33 trillion in 2001, began its journey to reach an estimated $18 trillion by the end of 2016. China's cheap labor-based production output will be an important part of the economic system redesigned after the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. China's supply of cheap labor will combine with Western capital and technology spread through globalization, creating pressure on the prices of products manufactured during this turbulent period and generating a positive income effect on the middle class that can maintain their jobs and income. Indeed, the classes that benefit most from globalization during this period are the working class in East Asia and the middle class in Western countries that can keep their jobs. As the 2000s began, following the slight recession that came after the rapid growth of the 1990s, the political and economic shock caused by the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks resulted in significant consequences from the loose monetary policy implemented by the US Federal Reserve. Fed Chairman Greenspan attempted to combat the recession caused by the bursting of the dot-com bubble by lowering the interest rate from 6.5% in May 2000 to 3.0% on September 17, 2001, and continued to lower interest rates after September 11, 2001. By June 2003, the Fed's interest rates would fall to 1%. Keeping monetary policy excessively loose for too long would be one of the major causes of the 2008 global economic crisis. In 2000, just before the recession, the Fed interest rate fluctuated between 5.75% and 6.5%, while economic growth was 4.1%, unemployment was 6%, and inflation was 3.4%. By 2004, economic growth in the US had reached 3.8%, unemployment was at 6%, and inflation was at an acceptable rate of 3.3%, almost matching the key economic data for 2000, yet the Fed raised interest rates to 2.25%, a level that was much lower than necessary. June 2014, 1.25%, December 2014, 2.25%. The fundamental principle of economics has been demonstrated in this case as well. If money is kept in excess and at low cost in the market, the value of physical assets that money can purchase, particularly asset prices, increases. With a decrease in risk perception, speculation is fueled by cheap and abundant money, and the system turns into a casino. Another weakness in the economic system that had gone unnoticed came to light with the accounting and auditing scandals that erupted in 2002-2003. The exotic accounting practices of companies like Enron, Adelphia, AOL, Imclone, Tyco, and WorldCom were generally based on inflating revenues to show higher profits and capitalizing expenses. This series of scandals, which arose from the fact that the audit function was independent on paper, but actually dependent on the auditee, shook the system to its core. A fundamental principle of the Western world has once again prevailed here. After the problem emerged, comprehensive reforms and measures were immediately implemented: SOX, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act and its derivatives, and those responsible were punished with the most severe penalties possible. Although almost all of the major auditing firms were involved in these irregularities, the number and nature of the incidents Arthur Andersen was involved in forced the firm to dissolve itself. Although the others weren't entirely innocent either, they became part of the new system through acquisitions and mergers, creating a powerful oligopoly known as the Big Four. The biggest difference and superiority of developed Western countries, particularly the US, is their ability to quickly fix errors in the system using scientific methods and hold institutions and individuals who deliberately disrupt or manipulate the system accountable within the framework of the law in a swift and exemplary manner. However, the continuation of these reforms, including Basel, has not fully covered the financial sector. High profit targets in the financial sector, greed, and weaknesses in risk management will also be one of the important causes of the 2008 global economic crisis. While the unipolar Western world, led by the US, was dealing with these issues, the Russian Federation's first task was to bring separatist republics, especially Chechnya, into line. Learning from their defeat in the First Chechen War, 1994 to 1996, the Russians brought Chechnya, which was de facto independent, to its knees with a short and bloody war. The doctrine used by the Russians in this war was identical to that of the Soviet Union. The Chechen incident also served as a warning to other potentially separatist republics within Russia. During NATO's expansion in 1999 to include Poland, the Czech Republic, and Hungary, Russia was unable to respond adequately due to the economic crisis it was experiencing. However, NATO's expansion in 2004 to include the Baltic states, former Soviet republics, was the last straw for Russia. The Russians will tighten their grip on the former Soviet Union republics in the future and will not shy away from direct and indirect military intervention, as seen in the examples of Georgia, 2008, and later Ukraine, Crimea, 2014, Donbas region, 2014-2016, which attempted to align themselves with the Western camp prematurely. Given Russia's extensive energy ties with the EU and the leverage this gives it, the EU, led by Germany, will take a more moderate approach to Russia's new role. By 2008, the Russian Federation had largely established its economic, diplomatic, and political dominance across the entire former Soviet Union, with the exception of the Baltic republics, Georgia, Ukraine, and, to a lesser extent, Azerbaijan. The period between 2001 and 2008 was one of full integration and expansion for the EU. Following the expansions in 2004 and 2007, the dream of a united Europe will reach a population of approximately 500 million, covering an area of 4.5 million kilometers squared, with a GDP rising from approximately $9 trillion in 2001 to $19 trillion in 2008. The European Union project, which some have strangely underestimated, has achieved tremendous success in the 60 years from 1948 to 2008, uniting very different cultures and nations within a framework of economic prosperity and democratic principles. However, the developments that will truly shake the Western world and the world at large will not come from terrorism or revisionist countries, but from within the system itself. The system's lack of institutional governance, oversight issues, and excessive greed for profit will ignite the fuse created by long-term loose monetary policy, triggering the 2008 global economic crisis. Thank you for watching. See you in the next episode.